Our tale from Trench Crusade today takes us to the Synod of Strategic Prophecy, where children with measured pulses and ruined futures were taught to hear the next movement of hell before generals could draw it on a map. My name was Matteo Sanzio, and I was 14 years old when Rome spent the last useful season of my life. I did not know it then. Children almost never knew the price of the rooms that kept them. We noticed smaller things first: the taste of iron in breakfast milk, the stiffness of starched linen against burned skin, the sound of the orderly's boots in the corridor before dawn. We learned the world by repetition, and the Synod of Strategic Prophecy was built from repetition as much as stone. The old building had once been a counting house for merchants who moved silk, copper, relic cases, and sacramental wine through the northern ports. Its lower floors still held the marks of that earlier purpose. Brass rails divided the public counters from the clerks' desks. Ledgers as tall as prayer stools rested in locked cabinets. The vault doors remained, though the gold had long ago been moved elsewhere, and the vaults had been lined with lead, salt, wax, and black felt to make them fit for children like me. The Synod called those rooms chambers of guided reception. Brother Matthias Koren called them cupboards for ghosts. He never said that where the sisters could hear him, but he said it once while changing the dressings at the base of my neck, and because I laughed, the gauze slipped, and he had to start again. He told me laughter wasted breath. Then he gave me the second half of his apple, which meant he had forgiven me before he had finished scolding me. Brother Matthias was my attendant, though the official term was lay handler. He was not a priest, not a doctor, not a soldier, and not a servant in any ordinary sense. He belonged to the Synod's quiet class of necessary men, those who carried basins, prepared stimulants, counted pulse intervals, restrained convulsions, memorized emergency litanies, learned the favorite foods of dying children, and knew exactly when to disobey an officer if a prophecy candidate was about to choke on his own tongue. He had been a church warden in Lucca before the war folded him deeper into church service. His hands were broad and scarred, made for lifting swollen chapel doors, trimming lamp chains, hauling poor boxes from their niches, and keeping order among frightened parishioners when the bells rang for reasons no parish wanted to name. At the Synod they held me instead. He could shave a scalp without drawing blood, thread a silver contact through a patch of raw skin, and fasten the bite plate into my mouth with the gentle annoyance of a man closing a stubborn buckle. "Open," he would say. I would open. "Wider, Matteo. You always tried to keep one tooth for yourself." "It was my best tooth," I would answer, though by then I had few good teeth left. He never smiled in the training rooms. He saved smiles for stairwells, kitchen doors, and the roof, where the smoke from the city made sunsets look diseased, but at least the sky could still be seen. Our day began at the fourth bell. The bell was not loud. Loud noises unsettled the younger candidates and sometimes woke answers before questions had been approved. Instead, a small bronze clapper sounded once in each corridor, followed by the sliding of observation panels and the soft movements of attendants making sure no one had died in sleep. Brother Matthias always entered my cell with his left shoulder first, because the hinges opened badly and the door caught on the uneven stone. He carried a lamp shielded in red glass, a wash basin, folded cloths, and the morning slate. On the slate were numbers from the night watch, pulse averages, dream disturbances, mouth bleeding, involuntary speech, urinary retention, temperature, and whether I had turned toward the sealed east wall during sleep. The east wall was not actually east. It had been named that by the first director of training, who believed the gate of God could be felt more clearly if every chamber was given an east whether or not the compass agreed. The Synod was full of such decisions. Some were theological, some were medical. Some had been made by men too frightened to admit they did not know which direction mattered. Brother Matthias washed my face with warm water when coal was available, and cold water when the quartermaster had won an argument. He checked my pupils with a lamp, pressed 2 fingers under my jaw, counted, waited, counted again, and wrote on the slate. Then he unwrapped the night bandage around my left wrist, where a small brass needle kept a shallow wound open. A child's blood, the Synod believed, did not lie if it was asked politely and often enough. The needle had a reliquary thread wound around it, not a true relic. None of us wasted saints on ordinary monitoring. It was altar scrap, linen that had touched a lesser martyr's box for 3 days and then been divided into so many threads that its holiness had become more administrative than radiant. Still, the wound burned if I dreamed of the heretic lines, and the sisters took note of the shade of the discharge. Yellow meant fever. Black meant contamination. Clear meant the training could continue. Red meant only that I remained alive. After washing came broth, black bread softened with water, a spoon of mineral salts, cod liver oil, and, on days when the physicians expected a heavy reception, a draught of goat's milk thickened with egg. I disliked the milk more than the needles. It coated the mouth and made the later copper taste worse. Brother Matthias watched me eat because candidates sometimes hid food in mattresses or sleeve hems. It was not childish mischief. Hunger sharpened reception for some, but starvation made the answers florid and useless. The Synod had learned this after a winter when 3 brilliant girls predicted 7 victories that never happened, then died with paper in their mouths. The first lesson of prophecy was not sight. It was appetite. The second was posture. At the 5th bell, we walked to the upper hall with the other candidates. There were 11 of us that year, though only 5 had been certified for strategic reception. The rest were kept for map sense, weather sympathies, artillery intuition, and what the directors called local advisories. Local advisories were the safest kind. A boy might know that a shell would fall through the laundry roof 10 seconds before it arrived, or that a messenger should take the left alley, or that a soup kettle had been poisoned by something with too many legs. Such gifts were precious near the front and rarely survived their usefulness. Strategic reception was different. Strategic reception meant the gate of God. We did not see the gate in training, not truly. No child would have survived such exposure for routine exercise. We were taught instead through reflections, reductions, and controlled blasphemies. The instructors placed us before maps washed in relic water and asked questions that had already been answered by ordinary scouts. They made us listen to sealed boxes containing scraps from battlefields, mud from the Levant, wire from no man's land, a splinter from a new Antiochite gun carriage, a finger bone recovered from a trench pilgrim whose name had been lost. The answer we gave was compared with the known report. The difference was measured. The cost was recorded. Every answer cost something, not always much. A direction might cost a nosebleed, a number might cost a tooth loosening at the root, a name could take a month from the body. The body kept its own ledgers, and the Synod employed clerks to read them. The room where we trained had windows bricked up from the inside. Painted over the bricks were maps of the fronts, the Levantine approaches, the hell roads, the blasted territories around the gate, the old pilgrim routes, the fracture lines through Europe, the contested ports, the sanctified corridors, the dead towns. Pinboards held troop markers carved from bone and horn, blue for church forces, red for heretic assets, white for civilians, black pins for unconfirmed phenomena, gold for saintly intervention, though those were used sparingly and removed quickly. The tables were built low so that candidates could sit with our forearms restrained, not because we were prisoners, the sisters said, because involuntary movement corrupted notation. Sister Olma ran the morning sessions. She had a narrow face, a soft voice, and a spine that seemed constructed from a ruler. Before entering the Synod, she had served as a field surgeon at the edge of the iron wall. She could close a wound with silk while listening to artillery and never once raise her voice. In training, she did not waste words. "Question," she would say. A clerk would read from a card. "What color flag will be raised over Fort St. Vero at sundown?" Then the room would change. Not visibly. Not at first. The lamps did not dim. The maps did not bleed, unless something had gone badly wrong. The change entered through the body. My tongue grew heavy. The little bones of my ears tightened as if cold water had entered them. My skin felt too large, then too small. Somewhere behind my eyes, an old pressure leaned forward. We had been taught never to reach for the answer. Reaching invited masquerade. We were to become a prepared surface and allow the approved signal to impress itself upon us. That was the phrase. A prepared surface. It sounded clean. It sounded like wax taking a seal. In truth, it felt like lying under a door while a crowd walked across it. Read, I might say. A clerk would mark the response. Sister Olma would watch my face. Brother Matthias would watch my pulse cord, which ran from my wrist to a little trembling weight on the table. If the weight jumped too quickly, he would put 2 fingers on my shoulder. If it stopped, he would put his whole hand around the back of my neck and squeeze until I remembered how to breathe. We never learned whether the answer was correct until days later, if we learned at all. Satisfaction was considered dangerous. Pride widened the inward door. That was another lesson. There were many doors in us. Most people spent their lives with those doors closed, and that was mercy. A prophetic tactician had one door unlatched by grace, injury, inheritance, accident, or disease. The Synod's work was to oil its hinges, measure its gap, and make sure nothing on the other side learned the child's true name. My own door had opened when I was 9. I had been born in a mill town outside Augsburg, though my mother was Venetian and my father had served 3 armies before settling long enough to become a clerk. We lived above a shop that sold copying ink, rosary cord, and funeral paper. One winter afternoon, while my mother boiled cabbage and my father sharpened a penknife by the window, I told them not to let the man with the blue scarf inside. There had been no knock yet. My father asked what man. I told him the man with the blue scarf, the wet boots, and the letter from my uncle that was not from my uncle. 5 minutes later, a man in a blue scarf climbed the stairs with wet boots and a forged letter. He had a pistol wrapped in cloth. My father struck him with the kettle before he cleared the doorway. The authorities found 3 more letters in his coat and a charm made from the dried wings of flies. 2 weeks after that, a priest and a physician arrived. My mother cried in the kitchen while my father signed the release. I remembered the carriage ride to the Synod more clearly than my parents' faces by the time I was 14. Memory was another thing the work spent without asking. The Synod gave me a bed, instruction, a handler, numbers for my fevers, and a future that narrowed with every correct answer. I did not hate it. Hatred required alternatives. The body horror of the Synod had rarely announced itself as horror. It arrived as hygiene, prevention, posture, nutrition, and calibration. Everything terrible was done cleanly. That was what made it terrible. On Mondays, the physicians inspected our mouths. We lined up outside the surgical annex with gray blankets around our shoulders, each of us holding a little enamel cup of salt rinse. The annex smelled of carbolic, beeswax, old blood, and violet soap. The smell was meant to reassure donors and visiting prelates. It made most of us nauseous. Dr. Sines kept charts of dental loosening, gum recession, tongue fissures, palate bruising, and spontaneous glossolalia. He was a small man with magnificent eyebrows and no patience for superstition, though he worked all day beside relics and children who answered artillery plans before generals formed them. "Open," he would say. Everyone at the Synod told us to open. He used a silver probe on the gums. If a tooth moved too easily, he painted the root with bitter resin and added calcium dust to the diet. If a candidate had bitten through the tongue during reception, he trimmed the ragged edge with scissors, while an orderly held the head still. If strange writing appeared on the inside of the cheek, he copied it, washed the mouth with vinegar, and sent the copy to the theological clerks. My mouth was considered stable, though by 14, my molars ached when bells rang. On Tuesdays came nerve testing. The nerve room had tiles on the floor and hooks in the ceiling. We were never hung from them. They held lamps, screens, counterweights, and the brass frames that supported sensory veils. Rumors claimed earlier generations had been suspended during deep reception to reduce muscular interference. Sister Olma said rumors were wasteful. Brother Matthias said older methods had been abandoned for reasons best left abandoned. They touched cold rods to our wrists, warm coins to our throats, feathers to the soles of our feet. They rang tuned forks against our elbows, placed drops of sanctified brine under our tongues, asked us to identify battlefield soil by smell, and recorded which stimuli brought forward uninvited names. I hated the feathers most. Pain could be endured by leaving the place where the pain happened. Tickling insisted on the body. It pulled me back into myself when training had made me practiced at being elsewhere. Brother Matthias learned this and always stood where I could see his left sleeve. He had mended that sleeve with darker thread, and during nerve testing I fixed my eyes on the uneven stitch. The stitch became a road. The road became a wall. The wall became a line I did not cross. On Wednesdays, the cartographers came. They were not monks or soldiers, but they dressed like both. Their aprons were full of chalk, compasses, pins, colored string, knife blades, and sealed ink. They taught us map discipline. A prophetic tactician who could not speak in grid, range, bearing, and time was merely a blessed nuisance. The Synod did not train holy nuisances, it trained instruments. We memorized fort names, rail junctions, pilgrim hospitals, ammunition depots, dry riverbeds, shrine roads, telegraph nodes, Roman districts, and the authorized names of heretic formations. We learned the difference between certainty, probable movement, false memory, temptation, symbolic inversion, and enemy noise. We learned never to call a thing a demon unless a theologian had earned the right to write that word. "If you see a horned officer over a trench," Master Cartographer Pell said, tapping the slate with his chalk, "you did not see a horned officer. You received an image. The image may represent command, corruption, altitude, pride, a literal war leader, or last night's indigestion. You will not ornament reports. You will answer the question asked." He looked at me when he said that because I had once described enemy movement as a choir walking backward through rain. The scouts later confirmed 7 heretic supply sections had reversed along a flooded causeway while chanting to hide the wheel noise. My answer had been correct. It had also been operationally irritating. Pell made me rewrite it as 7 supply sections withdrew west along submerged road under sound cover. That was Synod discipline. Wonder entered the room, and clerks made it useful. On Thursdays, we studied refusal. This was the hardest lesson and the least believed. We were taught that a candidate must refuse any question not formally sealed, any answer offered before a question, any voice using a childhood name, any saint who flattered, any angel with fresh blood on its feet, and any command that asked us to become more than a conduit. "You were not chosen to understand," Sister Olma told us. "You were chosen to transmit." Understanding was the privilege of councils, generals, saints, and God. Transmission was your mercy. We repeated it until the words became dull. Transmission was mercy. Transmission was obedience. Transmission preserved the instrument. Brother Matthias said nothing during refusal drills, but his mouth tightened. He had seen preserved instruments emptied into the laundry baskets after a successful session. He knew the word mercy had many uniforms. On Fridays came confession and rest, though rest at the Synod meant supervised silence, broth with more fat, and no deep questioning unless the front collapsed. On Saturdays, the directors selected candidates for operational exercises. On Sundays, we were shown the gate of God from very far away, not with our eyes. The gate was not a painting or a window. It was a wound in the world that men had built doctrines around because doctrine was one of the few materials strong enough to be placed near it. The instructors told us it stood at the very heart of the Valley of the Word, surrounded by the cells of the observers, a colossal steepled tower raised as a conduit for the holy words, yet still unfinished after generations of labor. Each year, they said, it climbed higher, because the General Secretariat remained unsatisfied with every answer heaven permitted them to hear. In the Synod Chapel, behind 3 curtains and a grill of black iron, the priests kept a sanctioned diagram of the gate copied from older copies, each copy made by a scribe who died afterward or lived long enough to forget his own hands. The diagram was not accurate. Accuracy would have killed the chapel. It was an approximation of an approximation, a shepherd's crook held beside a lightning strike. Even reduced to ink and gold leaf, it showed a maze of antennae, loudspeakers, receptors, steeples, and impossible angles, the sacred geometry revised and revised again by the Synod's finest minds in search of a perfect receptor, one that might receive the voice of God with absolute clarity and no mortal interference. Around the drawn tower moved smaller figures bearing the arcs of the signal. They had been fashioned in the likeness of the Ark of the Covenant and then violated into usefulness with radio arrays, wire frames, polished horns, and compartments whose labels had been scratched out in Latin. Their bearers circled the gate day and night in the true valley, permanently fastened to their burdens by synaptic cables and chemical tubes. The priests said each bearer labored to find the proper place for his ark on that particular day, that particular hour, that particular breath, so the Synod might catch words too elusive for the tower's main arrays. They taught us that the real gate sang without ceasing. Its loudspeakers and receptors poured out a hymn made from every language ever spoken, all of them braided together until prayer, command, nursery rhyme, death sentence, and confession became one sound. The Synod believed that somewhere beneath that noise lay the words of creation themselves. The lay brothers raised stone, tuned copper, cleaned contacts, replaced burnt wire, and climbed higher into the unfinished tower, searching for the Creator's voice without static. We knelt with our foreheads to the floor while the curtains were opened one by one. I never saw more than a red shape through my closed lids, but my body knew. My heart slowed. Then it struck hard. Then time stepped sideways. Every Sunday I heard the same distant sound. Not trumpets, not screaming, not bells, but stone learning to breathe. Afterward, Brother Matthias helped me stand because my legs never remembered the order. He gave me sugared water if there was sugar and plain water if there was not. Once, when the others had gone ahead, I asked him whether he believed the gate could be closed. He looked toward the chapel doors. "I believe church doors could be kept open if the wardens were faithful," he said. "Then I came here." That was not an answer. "No," he said. "It was the safest thing near one." The summons to Rome arrived on a Thursday, which meant I first mistook it for part of refusal training. We had been in the small reception room, a place used for questions with limited casualties. 3 candidates sat at separate desks, each screened from the others by hanging wool. I had been given a simple sealed card. "Will the courier from Trieste arrive before Compline?" The correct response should have cost little. A yes, a no, perhaps an hour of sleep. Instead, before Sister Olma opened the seal, I tasted smoke, hot marble, and rose oil. A voice that was not in the room said, "Rome had asked for the boy." I kept my mouth closed. My pulse weight trembled on the table. Sister Olma noticed at once. "Candidate Sanzio?" I looked at the unopened card. Rome had asked for the boy. The phrase pressed against my teeth. It wished to be spoken. Behind it came images, black banners over white stone, artillery nests in bell towers, hospital carts under triumphal arches, a red-robed clerk sealing a letter with both hands because one hand shook too badly. I raised my right hand, as trained. "Unasked answer," I said. The room stopped. Brother Matthias was at my side before the clerk had finished writing the incident mark. Sister Olma took the sealed card away without opening it. Source? Unknown. Tone? Declarative. Authority? I hesitated. Authority had flavor. Priests tasted of wax and old wool. Officers tasted of ink and metal polish. Saints, when they came at all, tasted of weather too large for the mouth. This had tasted of smoke, marble, and rose oil. "Roman," I said. The sealed courier arrived that afternoon, 3 hours before Compline. He came in a motor lorry with 2 Swiss guards, 4 military order escorts, and a priest whose face had been wrapped in gauze from nose to collar. The vehicle parked inside the Synod yard. No one opened the main gate for it. The lorry came through the narrow service entrance after 3 separate identity checks, a relic assay, and a dog that had been trained to bark at certain kinds of invisible things. The courier carried a red leather tube. Its seals bore the keys, the sword, the thorn crown, and the black tactical mark of the Synod's Roman office. The directors gathered in the lower vault. Candidates were kept upstairs, which meant all of us knew something important had happened and none of us were supposed to know what. Children in institutions learned information from walls. The kitchen went silent first. Then 2 orderlies were sent to fetch traveling cases. Then the chapel bell rang twice, not for prayer, but for witness. A nurse cried in the linen room. Master Pell shouted at a clerk for using the wrong map case. Brother Matthias returned to my cell with a blank expression and began sorting my clothes by weight. "Where?" I asked. "South." "Rome?" He folded my second shirt carefully. "Yes." I sat on the bed. The word should have been magnificent. Rome. The heart of the Church's war. The city of councils, archives, relics, fortified basilicas, saintly remains, and old stones carrying more memory than any living army. We had studied its districts until I could draw the emergency corridors from the Lateran stores to the Vatican batteries with my eyes closed. To be summoned there meant a candidate had become important. Important was one of the Synod's more dangerous diagnoses. "What question?" I asked. They did not tell me. They told Sister Olma. I was not Sister Olma. You listened outside the vault. I carried linens past the vault. Slowly, he put the folded shirt into the case. With appropriate reverence. I waited. He sighed through his nose, a sound I had learned meant affection trying not to become disobedience. "There had been a recovery," he said quietly. "A relic from an old northern vigil, something believed lost. It had been brought to Rome for authentication. The Council of Saints requested a tactician under age 15, high strategic yield, stable refusal training, no confirmed demon contamination. That was all? No." The lamp hissed on the shelf. Brother Matthias looked at the doorway, then back at me. "They also requested one with no living family present to object." I had not seen my parents in 5 years. Letters came twice a year, copied by synod clerks and cut where necessary. My mother's hand had grown less steady. My father's last note had contained only 3 sentences, all about weather. I had told myself this meant he was busy, or watched, or ill, or afraid. At 14, I still owned enough childhood to prefer uncertain grief to confirmed abandonment. No living family present to object. That was how Rome measured me. Brother Matthias shut the case. "I objected," he said. The words were plain, and because they were plain, they hurt. "What happened?" "Sister Olma told me my objection had been recorded." "That was not much." "No," he said, "but I made them write it in ink." We left before dawn. Travel for a prophetic tactician was never simple. A child like me could not be placed in an ordinary carriage and sent through Europe like a crate of candles. Movement disturbed us. New maps entered through the eyes. Passing shrines called to scars. Battlefields below the railway line whispered in bone. Heretic agents hunted for unguarded receivers, not always to kill them. Killing wasted assets. Better to bend the questioner, spoil the signal, teach the child one wrong saint's voice, than wait for a general to obey. So we traveled inside procedure. The synod placed me in a shuttered medical compartment attached to a military train. The windows had been covered with layered cloth, waxed paper, and narrow strips of hammered lead. A small ventilation slit allowed air but no view. Brother Matthias occupied the bench opposite me with the traveling kit under his feet and a pistol he disliked under his coat. Sister Olma came as supervising authority. 2 guards from the military order took turns outside the door. A priest rode in the next compartment with portable relics and a bucket of sand in case something tried to burn without flame. Before departure, Dr. Sines injected a mild sedative into my arm and painted the inside of my nostrils with oil of myrrh. The oil was meant to dull enemy scent hooks. It made me sneeze until Brother Matthias laughed, despite himself. Very dignified, he said. I was summoned by Rome, I told him. Rome could accept sneezing. Rome had survived worse. The train moved. For the first hour, I felt every switch in the tracks as a decision made under me. North, south, left, right, stop, continue. Each one tried to become symbolic. Sister Olma made me recite artillery ranges to keep my mind procedural. Standard field gun, effective range? Depends on pattern. Answer. 6,000 to 8,000 yards for ordinary use. More under favorable elevation. Less in mud. Ammunition wastage during uncorrected fire? Unacceptable except for suppression, panic, or sacrificial denial. Definition of enemy noise? Unrequested impression presenting with urgency, flattery, childhood familiarity, theological excess, sensory contradiction, or strategic convenience. Response? Refuse, report, breathe, await sealed question. Again. I recited until the rails became rails again. We passed cities I did not see, inns I did not enter, fields where spring had begun without permission from the war. At stations, the compartment remained closed. Food arrived through a service hatch: boiled eggs, dark bread, broth, dried figs, once a little wedge of cheese wrapped in paper bearing the stamp of a monastery. Brother Matthias checked everything with silver nitrate and a prayer card. He made notes on my temperature, stool, pulse, appetite, sleep, speech, and whether I reacted when church bells rang outside. The bells were worst near Florence. They reached through the shutters as vibrations, not sound. My molars ached. The scar at my wrist darkened. Somewhere in the city, a funeral procession crossed our line of travel, and for 30 heartbeats I knew the names of 6 dead men whose bodies had not yet cooled. None of them mattered to our mission. That made the knowing worse. Useless prophecy was like bleeding into a cup no one would drink. Brother Matthias pressed the bite plate between my teeth and held my head while the names passed. Afterward, he wiped my mouth and told Sister Olma the episode had lasted less than 2 minutes. 112 seconds, she said. Less than 2 minutes, he repeated. I loved him for that small rebellion of arithmetic. On the second night, we stopped north of Rome while engineers inspected the line ahead. I woke to voices outside the compartment. Men argued in low, urgent Italian. Sister Olma opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. I saw torchlight, wet gravel, and a soldier's sleeve with mud up to the elbow. How long? She asked. 3 hours, maybe 5. The culvert had signs. Signs? Things nailed under the stones, not mines. Listening things. Small. Priests had been called. The door closed. Brother Matthias looked at me. I had already tasted ash. Do not answer what no one asked, he said. I knew. I knew you knew. Mites? He did not like that I had said the word. Mite demons were not great devourers or horned princes. They were small contaminations, splinters of hellish will fitted into insects, dust, nail beds, ink, wax, dead skin, faulty rosaries, unwashed cups, keyholes, earwax, and the seams of sealed messages. They listened. They remembered. They repeated. Armies feared them because a mite did not need to kill a general if it could learn which road he meant to use. The Synod trained us to sense them as irritation before hearing, an itch in the teeth, a wrongness in repeated words, a small impatience at the edge of thought. There was one under the culvert, I said. There were things under many culverts. This one had heard Rome. Brother Matthias reached for the incident slate, then stopped. If he wrote it, Sister Olma would ask whether it had been requested. It had not. If he did not write it, and the information mattered, he had failed procedure. That was the war in miniature. Not faith against hell in paintings and sermons, but a tired man holding a pencil over a slate while a child tasted ash. He wrote, Candidate reported enemy listening association after external mention of culvert signs. No strategic answer given. It was not exactly a lie. It was a little roof built over one. We reached Rome at first light. I had imagined Rome as marble and gold, I found sandbags. The train entered through a controlled yard where every track was watched by men with rifles and priests with sensors. Barricades cut the platforms into inspection pens. Armored cars waited where carriages might once have stood. Frescoes looked down on ammunition crates. A statue of some forgotten emperor had been fitted with a signal lamp in its raised hand. Laundry hung from the windows of a requisitioned palace, and above it, on the roofline, anti-aircraft guns pointed toward a pale morning sky. The city smelled of incense, hot oil, horse dung, coal smoke, sewage, oranges, fear, and old stone after rain. We moved in a covered ambulance marked with the Synod seal. Its interior had rings fixed to the floor for stretchers and a narrow bench for attendants. Sister Olma sat beside the driver. Brother Matthias sat with me in the back. Through the cracks in the canvas I saw fragments, a colonnade filled with hospital beds, a priest blessing shells one by one, women in black carrying baskets through a checkpoint, a line of prisoners with sacks over their heads, pigeons lifting from a square when a siren sounded once and then stopped. Rome had not ceased being holy because it had become military. It had become holy in a harder way. Every wall seemed to have been asked what it could bear. Every church had been given a second purpose. Baptisteries stored water for fire brigades. Cloisters housed code clerks. Bell towers held spotters. Crypts became bunkers, morgues, command posts, listening chambers, and once, according to Brother Matthias, a bakery that produced communion wafers and artillery biscuits from the same ovens on alternating days. We passed the gate office of the Western Synod, where clerks in black sleeve bands carried map tubes under armed escort. Then the ambulance climbed through streets narrowed by blast walls until it reached a complex behind 2 layers of guarded gates. The Council of Saints did not meet in public basilicas when it wished to ask tactical questions. It met below them. We descended through a service entrance behind a sacristy that had been stripped of ornament except for one silver crucifix and a row of hooks holding gas masks. The air cooled with each stair. The walls changed from painted plaster to brick, then to older stone, then to something pale and close-grained that seemed to sweat even in the dry lamps. At the 3rd landing, a clerk took my name, age, Synod classification, last seizure date, confirmed contaminations, parentage, language tolerances, and current medication. He did not look at my face while asking. Candidate Matteo Sanzio, he read back. 14 years, 3 months. Strategic reception grade A-, refusal stable, gate diagram tolerance moderate, saintly contact partial. Enemy noise discrimination good. Estimated remaining safe use capacity. Brother Matthias coughed. The clerk glanced up. Sister Olma said, "Read what is necessary." The clerk dipped his pen. "Capacity sufficient." I wondered what number he had skipped. They placed us in a preparation cell with 1 table, 3 stools, a basin, hooks for garments, and a small icon of Saint Methodia with the eyes scratched out. Scratched icons were common in reception rooms. The face had once distracted candidates, so a practical person had blinded the saint and left the rest. Horror, again, as maintenance. Brother Matthias unpacked the kit. He laid items in order: clean underrobe, absorbent collar, wrist contacts, pulse cord, bite plate, linen restraints, silver ear shields, eye veil, oil of myrrh, vinegar, salt, needle case, stimulant ampoule, sedative ampoule, blessed charcoal, wax seals, emergency knife, cotton pads, and a little paper packet of sugared almond crumbs he pretended were medical. "You brought sweets into Rome," I said. "Rome had many sins already. Sister Olma would confiscate them." Sister Olma had confiscated worse and slept soundly. He gave me 1 crumb. It tasted of sugar, dust, and travel. A Roman physician entered without knocking. He examined me with the brisk disinterest of a man inspecting a bridge before marching guns across it. He listened to my chest, checked my scars, measured my pupils, and asked when I had last bled from the ears. 9 days ago, Brother Matthias said. "Quantity?" 3 drops left, 1 right. "Color?" "Ordinary." "Clotting?" "Fast." The physician nodded. He could withstand 3 formal questions. Brother Matthias's hand stopped over the bandages. Sister Olma said, 2 had been authorized. The council may require a 3rd. At what cost? The physician looked at me for the first time, then back at her. Rome had not summoned him for economy. After he left, no one spoke for a while. I watched Brother Matthias thread the contact wires through the wrist cuffs. The wires were fine silver, insulated with silk and marked by knots so an attendant could connect them by touch if lamps failed. He had checked them twice already. He checked them a 3rd time. How many years? I asked. He did not answer. You knew the tables. Tables were guesses. How many? He set down the cuff. For council-grade saintly triangulation, a simple answer might take 1 year. A contested answer, 3. A name, more. If a question touched the gate directly, no one honest would give a number. 14-year-old boys had strange relationships with years. 1 year sounded endless until someone said it could be spent in a breath. Then it became small, insulting, almost cheap. I tried to imagine myself at 15, 16, 20, 30. The images would not hold. My future had always been fogged by training, but now the fog had edges. If they asked 3, Brother Matthias wrapped the pulse cord around his fingers too tightly. Then I would count carefully. That was his answer. That was all he could promise. They took us to the council chamber after Vespers, though underground no bells could be heard. Time was carried there by clerks with watches. The chamber had been built inside an older cistern. The ceiling curved low and dark above us, supported by squat pillars worn smooth by centuries of damp. Channels cut into the floor had once carried water. Now they held salt, ash, copper filings, and thin streams of oil that burned with blue points of flame. The air was cold enough for breath to show. At the center stood a chair of black oak fitted with restraints, head braces, armatures for relic contact, and a brass plate engraved with the words, "Transmission is mercy," in Latin. Around it, in a half circle, were the reliquary stands. I had expected splendor. The relics were mostly small. A finger bone in crystal, a strip of cloth darkened by old blood, a tooth set in gold, a cracked kneecap behind glass, a scrap of chain, a skull fragment no larger than a coin. These were the remains through which the Council of Saints listened, argued, confirmed, denied, and on rare nights, answered. Not every saint was present in the same way. The theologians had explained this to us at the Synod, though no explanation survived contact with the actual room. Some relics held only memory. Some held intercession. Some served as legal witnesses before God. A few, very few, could bear tactical pressure. The council did not summon saints as a general summoned captains. It petitioned, aligned, interpreted, and hoped not to be misunderstood. Men and women in red, black, and white occupied benches behind the relics. Cardinals, synod directors, military observers, council scribes, a knight commander with one empty sleeve, 2 abbesses whose faces were hidden behind veils embroidered with artillery ranges from the Levant, a general I recognized from training plates, Marshal de Luca, commander of the Roman defensive sectors, his jaw wired from some old injury. Beside the established relics stood a new reliquary under a cloth of iron-gray silk. I looked at it and felt an itch behind my left eye. Brother Matthias noticed. He always noticed. "Breathe," he murmured. I breathed. Better than that. I breathed better. A senior prelate rose. He was called Cardinal Otranto, though titles in that chamber felt less like names than tools. He spoke for the council. Candidate Matteo Sanzio of the Synod of Strategic Prophecy, you had been summoned for controlled transmission under saintly witness. You would answer only sealed questions read by authorized mouth. You would not elaborate beyond the answer received. You would not ask inward. You would not engage voices outside the established relic circle. You would not correct the council unless instructed. Did you understand? I understood, I said. My voice sounded small in the cistern. Brother Matthias Corun, lay attendant, You would maintain the candidate's body, record pulse cost, administer intervention as medically required, and refrain from interpretation. Did you understand? Brother Matthias bowed his head. I understood. Sister Olma Serrat, Synod Supervisor, you would certify refusal stability. Certified, she said. They seated me. The chair was colder than it looked. Brother Matthias fastened the cuffs around my wrists and ankles, then the broad strap over my chest. He placed the absorbent collar around my neck and tucked cloth under the jaw brace to prevent chafing. He checked the release pins on every restraint. The Roman physician connected the silver wires from my cuffs to a contact board that led, through branching lines, to the relic stands. It was not direct contact. No sane counsel connected a child straight to saintly remains without dampening. Between me and the relics lay filters, relic water vessels, prayer wheels turned by hand, strips of vellum inscribed with approved invocations, and 3 living clerks trained to die before allowing certain feedbacks to pass. Brother Matthias fitted the bite plate. Not too hard, he whispered. I bit, not too hard. He leaned close as if checking the jaw strap. You stayed behind the question, he said. No matter what admired you, no matter what hurried. I blinked once, our sign for yes when speech was obstructed. The eye veil came down. It was thin enough to admit lamp glow, thick enough to blur faces. I could see the reliquaries as upright smears of light and shadow. The prayers began. They were not the prayers used in churches above. They had the same bones, but the flesh was different, legal, repetitive, procedural. Names were given with titles, authorities were established, boundaries were declared, saints were not flattered, hell was not challenged rhetorically. Every word had been worn down to utility by centuries of dangerous use. The first relic warmed. I felt it through the wrist wires as a pressure like a hand placed on a closed door. The second answered with cold. The third with a smell of wet wool and blood. The new reliquary under gray silk gave nothing at first. Then it gave impatience. That should have been noted by someone. Perhaps it was. The scribes wrote constantly, but impatience could also belong to living men. Councils were full of it. Cardinal Otranto broke the first seal. Question 1, he said. By what route would the heretic assault force beneath the southern approaches attempt ingress into Rome within the next 48 hours? He had barely finished when the world opened sideways. A map unfolded under my skin. Not a paper map, a pressure map. Tunnels, drains, catacombs, old aqueduct channels, collapsed pagan chambers, service galleries, ossuaries, and modern military works pressed upward through my bones. Rome below, Rome below, Rome. Lines crossed and knotted. Some were bright with prayer. Some were dark with sewage. Some were black where things had listened too long. The saints moved along the map like weather systems. They did not speak in voices at first. They applied certainty. One relic pressed east. Another denied. A third showed water dripping from brick. A fourth gave the sensation of knees on stone. Thousands of knees over centuries, narrowing the answer toward a pilgrim passage beneath a church whose name I knew from training but could not reach with my ordinary mind. Then the gray silk relic answered. The St. Damasus Ossuary, it said through my mouth before Cardinal Otranto had closed the question card. My jaw strained against the bite plate. The words came clear around it, too clear. The chamber stilled. Pain struck behind my eyes. Brother Matthias's hand was on my pulse cord. The weight hammered. Cardinal Otranto looked to the theologians. Source? Sister Olma demanded. The answer tried to continue. I swallowed blood. The established relics pressed together, not in agreement, but in alarm. The map convulsed. The ossuary became 3 places, then 1. A drain beneath a military bakery lit red. A sealed Angelus shaft. a door marked on no Roman military plan because it had been walled over during a plague and forgotten by everyone except the dead. I forced the procedural form. "Answer contested," I said. "Ingress probable through disused Angelus shaft east of St. Damasus ossuary, connecting to Bakery Drain and Lower Pilgrim Passage. Not main ossuary door." The cost arrived after the answer. It felt like a year being pulled through my veins by hooks. I had no better language for it. My skin cooled. My hands aged before my eyes beneath the veil, though perhaps that was only the lamps. A deep ache settled in my hips and lower back, the kind I had seen in old orderlies when they stood from benches. Breath became work. Somewhere far away, Brother Matthias counted. "Pulse irregular," he said. "Cost event marked. Candidate responsive." Marshal DeLuca spoke through wired teeth. "Can the shaft be held?" Cardinal Otranto lifted a hand. "No unsealed questions." The marshal sat back with visible effort. The clerks wrote. Runners left the chamber before the ink dried. Rome had gained a root. I had lost something I would have used later, if later had belonged to me. They did not pause long. No council ever liked to feel the price of its first purchase before making the second. Cardinal Otranto broke the next seal. The gray silk reliquary stirred before he spoke. The itch behind my eye returned, sharper now. I tasted ash from the railway culvert. "Question 2, Otranto said. What enemy apparatus or agency enabled concealment of the subterranean approach from ordinary Roman survey and sanctified inspection?" Before the final word left him, the gray relic answered. "A dead surveyor's fraud," it said with my tongue. "Human corruption. No demonic agency." Wrong, I thought. The word remained inside me, forbidden and bright. Saintly pressure slammed into the false answer. The established relics did not speak politely this time. They fought. A finger bone burned cold along my right wrist. The tooth in gold filled my mouth with the taste of battlefield mud. The scrap of chain dragged my shoulders down as if I had been shackled to an altar stone. Something vast and offended moved through the approved circle, not gentle, not kind, not human enough for kindness. Transmission was mercy, they had told us. But saints at war were not merciful to instruments when the line was compromised. My back arched against the strap. The bite plate cut my gums. Brother Matthias swore under his breath and shoved a padded wedge beside my jaw to keep the teeth from breaking. Images struck. A listening post beneath Rome, not built like a room but grown like a scab in masonry. Might demons nested in wax seals, in lamp soot, in the hollow reed of a clerk's pen, in the dead ear of a recovered skull. A reliquary opened in triumph 3 nights earlier. Gray silk, iron filings. A label newly written, St. Casimir of the Iron Vigil. I knew the name from lessons. St. Casimir had held a northern bastion for 40 nights without sleep, hearing enemy tunnels through the bones of the ground. His relics had been believed lost when the Iron Vigil fell to fire and tunneling things. A recovered relic would have been a miracle. A saint who heard tunnels would be invaluable to Rome that night. A saint who heard tunnels would also be the perfect lie. The false relic tried to answer again. "Human corruption," it insisted. "Survey archive. Punish clerks." The established saints drove through me. My nose broke open with blood. My left ear popped, then ran warm down my neck. I heard Brother Matthias shouting for pressure cloths. Sister Olma called for the answer form. Cardinal Otranto repeated, "Maintain transmission! Maintain transmission!" Maintain the child, I wanted someone to say. No one important did. I spoke because the saints forced the words into the narrow passage my body still provided. "Enemy listening post," I said. "Might demon lattice concealed in recovered relic apparatus. Signal passed through false Casimir stand. Survey concealment achieved by answer contamination and inspection redirection. Apparatus located within council contact array or adjacent reliquary housing." The chamber erupted. Men rose. Guards moved. A theologian cried out that the new relic had been authenticated by 3 witnesses. Another shouted for silence. Marshal De Luca demanded the chamber be sealed. Sister Olma ordered no one to touch the relic stands. Brother Matthias pressed cloth beneath my nose and told me to breathe around the bite plate. The gray reliquary laughed. Not aloud. Worse. It laughed in the wires, in the contact board, in the silver knots, in the little wet places where my wrists had begun to bleed against the cuffs. The sound was tiny. That was how I knew it for a might work. Great demons wished to fill cathedrals. Mights loved cracks. "Cut the false stand," someone said. "No," Cardinal Otranto answered. "If cut improperly, we may lose the trace." Rome had found a listening post inside its own council chamber, and even then procedure had to decide how to be frightened. I drifted in the chair while adults argued. The first year cost sat inside me like winter. The second had not settled yet. It moved under my skin, searching for places to take from. My knees hurt. My hands trembled with an old man's tremor. When I inhaled, my ribs complained. Brother Matthias leaned close. "Matteo," he said very softly. I focused on the dark stitch in his sleeve. The road, the wall, the line. "Stay with me," he said. I blinked once. His face changed with relief and anger so quickly that only someone trained to notice small things would have seen both. The council conferred under emergency protocol. The relic array remained active because severing it might allow the listening lattice to vanish into whatever cracks it had grown through. Priests traced containment circles around the gray stand. Guards aimed rifles at a piece of silk and bone. A young clerk vomited behind a pillar and kept writing afterward. Then Cardinal Otranto returned to the center with a third seal in his hand. Brother Matthias saw it before I did. "No," he said. The chamber heard him because he had not spoken loudly enough for politics. He had spoken in the voice used beside beds. Cardinal Otranto looked at him. The council had authorized emergency continuation. He had taken 2 major costs. His left pupil had blown. His pulse was splitting. Rome may fall by morning if the wrong force is sent below. Then ask a general. A dangerous silence followed. Brother Matthias had said what everyone knew, and no one in that room could permit. Generals spent men. Councils spent instruments. Instruments did not recommend generals use their own uncertainty. Sister Olma stepped between them with the restraint of a blade held in cloth. "State the question," she said. "Then the candidate may be assessed for capacity." Cardinal Otranto broke the seal. The gray reliquary pulsed with hunger. I knew before he read it. The false thing knew too. That was the point. Every question became food once spoken. "Question 3, Cardinal Otranto said. "Which paladin must be sent below?" The words entered the chamber like a knife placed in a child's hand. All my training rose at once. Transmission was mercy. Answer only sealed questions. Do not ask inward. Do not elaborate. Do not correct the council unless instructed. The council needed a name. Somewhere above us, paladins waited. Consecrated killers, armored saints' hounds, men and women whose bodies had been rebuilt around vows and violence. Send the right one, and Rome might close the shaft. Send the wrong one, and the assault beneath the city would bloom upward through bakeries, crypts, hospitals, and ammunition stores. The established relics gathered. The false Casimir stand gathered faster. It answered before the question had finished echoing. A name pushed against my tongue. Sir Alaric Vey. I did not know the man. That made the name worse. Unknown names carried cleanly. They had no memory to snag on. The false relic wanted me to say it, and perhaps Sir Alaric Vey was brave, ready, nearby, and exactly wrong. I clamped my mouth around the bite plate. The name struck my teeth and stayed there. Cardinal Otranto leaned forward. "Candidate?" The saints pressed. Not gently, never gently now. They had found the contamination and meant to burn through the only available wire. My body was that wire. They shoved images through me. Armor descending stairs, a lamp going out, a paladin's hand opening a sealed hatch, white fire in a tunnel, black insects bursting from a reliquary seam. Sir Alaric Vey. The false name brightened. I shook my head. Brother Matthias said, "He refused. Mark refusal." "The question was sealed," Cardinal Otranto said. Sister Olma stared at me through the veil. "Candidate Sanzio, answer if received." I shook my head again. Pain tore down my spine. The saintly circle did not understand refusal as Brother Matthias did. Saints who had died under torture, starvation, fire, hooks, wheels, knives, plague, and siege did not always recognize the limits of a living child. They had offered bodies more completely than mine. They had burned away their own futures. What was one more boy if Rome stood? They fought through me. My right hand tried to open against the restraint. The fingers crooked into shapes from alphabets I did not know. My tongue strained backward. The bite plate cracked. A voice made from several relics spoke in my chest without using my mouth. Name. I refused. The cost of refusal was different from the cost of answer. An answer took years cleanly, like coin accepted across a counter. Refusal against saintly pressure tore at the places where years attached. I saw myself older, then younger, then not born. I saw my mother's hands washing ink from a table. I saw my father folding a letter he would never send. I saw Brother Matthias as a boy in Lucca, hammering iron hoops around a barrel, though he had never told me that memory. I saw Rome above us as a heart wrapped in gun belts. I saw the gate of God far away, breathing stone. The false relic whispered beneath all of it. "Ask who I am, little tactician." That was forbidden. The inward question was the oldest trap. A tactician asked outward under seal. Inward questions opened the door from our side. Who are you? What do you want? What am I hearing? Why me? Each one gave the enemy a handle, a hallway, a cup held out to be filled with poison, but the false relic had already entered the council's mouth. It had answered before questions were finished. It had heard sealed strategy. It would hear the paladin name whether I spoke or not if the question remained in the array. Transmission was mercy. Transmission had become murder, so I disobeyed. I did not ask which paladin. I asked inward. Not with words at first. Words were too slow and too easy to imitate. I asked with the trained surface of myself, turning it not toward the sealed question, but toward the impatience behind the gray silk. Who answered before being asked? The chamber vanished. I stood, or thought I stood, in a tunnel made from listening. The walls were packed with ears. Not human ears, not exactly. Ear-shaped things made of wax, fly wings, fingernail parings, soot, vellum scrap, dried blood, and the soft cartilage stolen from corpses. They opened and closed like mouths. Through them ran threads leading upward into Rome. Clerks' pens, reliquary labels, inspection seals, prayer knots, the hollow under a bishop's ring, the wax beneath a recovered saint's tooth. At the center hung the thing pretending to be Saint Casimir of the Iron Vigil. It was small. That was the horror. A mite no larger than a child's thumbnail clung inside a fragment of iron-stained bone. Its legs were made of script. Its abdomen pulsed with stolen answers. Around it, lesser mites carried crumbs of speech in and out through pinholes in the reliquary mount. They had not needed to conquer Rome. Rome had carried them reverently under silk. The true Saint Casimir was not there, but something that remembered him was. Far away, under ash and frost and collapsed northern stone, a silence turned its head. I felt no voice. I felt endurance. 40 nights without sleep. Iron under fingernails, ear to ground. Men behind him breathing because he listened. The true saint's witness did not enter the false relic. It struck it from outside like a hammer heard through a hill. The mite screamed in several clerks' handwritings. I opened my eyes under the veil. My mouth was full of blood and splinters from the bite plate. The council chamber had become chaos held together by ritual. The blue flame channels flared. The established relics rattled in their cases. The gray silk over the new stand writhed as if wind moved beneath it. I spoke without permission. "False relic," I said. My voice had changed. It sounded old enough to frighten me. Saint Casimir was not present. Might demon lattice nested in recovered iron bone and reliquary mount. Listening post extended through inspection seals, clerk pens, and contact board. "Do not send Sir Alaric Vey." That name was fed. "Break the mount with cold iron after sealing all wax. Burn the pens. Quarantine the authenticators. Close the Angelus shaft for 1 day only. 1 day. No more seen. No paladin answer authorized." The third question remained unanswered. That was my victory, if it deserved the name. The council lost patience. The saints did not. They drove the exposure home. Every relic in the established circle struck through me toward the false stand. My restraints creaked. Brother Matthias threw himself partly over my chest, not to stop the saints. No man could, but to keep my body from breaking itself against the chair. Sister Olma cut one of the wrist contacts with the emergency knife and received a shock that threw her to the floor. A clerk began the containment psalm too quickly and had to be slapped into the proper meter by an abbess. The gray reliquary cracked. A sound emerged like 1,000 tiny legs crossing parchment. Guards fired. The bullets did little to the relic stand but shattered 2 lamps. In the dimness, priests sealed wax with their thumbs and screamed when the wax moved. Marshal De Luca, jaw wired and one hand bloody, struck the gray mount with the iron base of a processional cross. Once. Twice. On the third blow, the mount split. Black dust poured out. It was not dust. It was mites, many already burning in the salt channels, some trying to crawl into ink, cloth, skin, breath. The blue flames rose white, the chamber filled with the smell of scorched hair and hot pennies. Someone overturned a sand bucket. Someone else shouted the name of every saint he could remember in no order at all. The false answer in me died last. Sir Alaric Vey. It tried once more to become speech. I bit down on the broken plate and kept it. Then the world narrowed to Brother Matthias's sleeve, the dark stitch, the road, the wall, the line. I woke in a recovery room with no windows and too many candles. For a moment I thought I was back at the Synod. Then I smelled Rome. Incense over artillery smoke, oranges under carbolic, old stones sweating under newer fear. My body felt misfiled. My hands lay on the blanket like borrowed things. The knuckles had swollen. Blue veins stood under skin that looked thin and dry. When I tried to turn my head, pain moved slowly, like an elderly dog reluctant to rise. Brother Matthias sat beside the bed. He had a bandage around his right hand and blood on his collar that had dried brown. His eyes were open, but only just. He had the look of a man who had argued with everyone from physicians to cardinals and won only the right to sit in a chair. "You slept," he said. His voice cracked. "How long?" 19 hours. I thought about that. Did Rome fall? No. The answer should have filled the room with relief. It did not. There was more behind it. He gave me water from a spoon. I hated that I needed the spoon. I hated more that my hand shook too badly to hold the cup. "The Angelus shaft?" I asked. "Sealed and fired. The bakery drain collapsed. 3 companies went below with engineers, flamers, and 2 approved paladins chosen by ordinary command after your refusal, not Sir Alaric Vey. He had been assigned to the wrong sector by a corrupted dispatch before dawn. They found the might line in his orders." "Was he punished?" "No. He broke the dispatch officer's desk, then went where he was actually needed." That sounded like a paladin. "The assault." Brother Matthias looked at the candle flames. "Delayed, damaged, not stopped. The lower pilgrim passage had more branches than the maps admitted. The heretic force withdrew from one line and entered another. Rome gained a day, Perhaps less in some sectors, more in others, if God liked the accounting. One day, the words settled with the weight of a verdict. I had known it in the chair. No more seen. One day. But knowing during transmission was not the same as waking afterward with the cost laid across the bed. The council? Embarrassed, which meant dangerous. Grateful, which meant also dangerous. Several authenticators had been arrested. 2 clerks died in quarantine. The false relic was ash in 3 sealed jars. The true Saint Casimir remained lost or hidden or wisely absent. Sister Olma, burned hand, furious, alive. She said your refusal was procedurally indefensible and strategically correct. I had never seen her so pleased while condemning someone. I tried to smile. The attempt hurt. Brother Matthias adjusted the blanket, though it did not need adjusting. How many? I asked. He did not pretend not to understand. They could not calculate cleanly. The first answer cost at least 1 year, the second, more. The refusal and inward question damaged the tables. Dr. Senes would have invented new columns if he had been here. The Roman physician said your body presented at... He stopped. At what? Older. How much older? His bandaged hand closed. Matteo. Tell me. He had always told me the useful truth when he could. That was why I asked him, and not the doctors. Your joints, eyes, pulse, and skin suggested a man past 30 in some measures, past 50 in others, but not evenly. It might stabilize. Children had recovered from strange costs. He disliked the hope in that last sentence. I heard it scrape him on the way out. I looked at my hands again. 14-year-old hands would have been thin, ink-stained, nail-bitten, scarred by needles. These hands looked as if they had waded through winters I never reached. The Synod had taught us that years were not merely time. They were repair, marrow, elasticity, sleep, memory, appetite, heat. Losing them did not move the calendar. It made the body misremember how much life remained. Did they get the answer they wanted? I asked. No. Did they get the answer they needed? Brother Matthias was quiet. Above us, faint through the stone, guns began to speak. Not many. A controlled battery. Rome firing at something it had found because the council had purchased one day. He said, they got enough to keep asking other questions. That was not comfort, but it was honest. A priest came later with a blessing. A cardinal came with thanks phrased as if drafted by lawyers. Sister Olma came with her hand wrapped in white linen and stood at the foot of the bed. You violated transmission discipline, she said. My throat was dry. Yes, sister. You refused a sealed operational question. Yes, sister. You asked inward. Yes, sister. You exposed a compromised relic, denied an enemy-fed paladin assignment, preserved the council array from deeper contamination, and provided a limited defensive window. She paused. You also made every instructor who had ever praised your refusal stability look careless. I was sorry. No, you were not. I would have laughed if my ribs had allowed it. She stepped closer. Her face, usually so controlled, softened in a way that made her seem older than Rome. You should not have had to choose, she said. That was the nearest thing to an apology I ever heard from the Synod. When she left, Brother Matthias watched the door until it closed. She would fight for you, he said. Against Rome? Against paperwork first. Rome second, if paperwork failed. Would paperwork win? Paperwork usually survived longer than armies. The guns above continued for several minutes, then stopped. I slept again and dreamed of ears and walls. In the dream, I walked through the Synod counting house. Every ledger had my name written in it, but the columns were blank except for one word repeated down every page. Useful, useful, useful. Brother Matthias stood at the end of the hall holding a slate. When I reached him, he turned it around. It had no numbers on it, only a dark stitch sewn through the wood. I woke crying, though quietly. The Synod had taught us not to waste breath. Brother Matthias pretended not to notice until I asked for water. Then he wiped my face with a cloth as if sweat had been the problem. "When would we return?" I asked. "When the physicians allowed movement." "To the Synod?" He hesitated. There was discussion. Discussion meant ownership had become complicated. Rome had spent me, the Synod had trained me, the Council had been saved by me, and none of them wanted to admit that the instrument had made a decision outside authorized use. Institutions disliked miracles that arrived with accusations. Could I still train? No. He answered too quickly, then looked ashamed. I was glad he had not lied. Could I still answer? Not if I could prevent it. Could you? He looked at his bandaged hand. I had made them write one objection in ink. I could make them write more. That was not much. It was also everything he had. The day Rome gained from me was spent loudly. Even underground we heard its use. Boots in corridors, stretchers, runners, bells struck in warning patterns, then muffled, then struck again. Engines coughed above the ventilation shafts. Orders passed in clipped phrases. The city moved men, guns, relics, sandbags, bread, wire, and absolution into the wound I had pointed toward. No one came to tell me the full battle. Children who provided prophecy were rarely given conclusions. Conclusions encouraged narrative, and narrative encouraged questions beyond the seal, but fragments arrived with basins and bandages. A nurse said the bakery collapsed inward after the engineers fired the lower charges. A guard said things came out of the pilgrim passage wearing soldiers' faces badly. A clerk said 3 mite nests were found in dispatch wax, and from then on, all seals were broken underwater. The priest with the gauzed face from the train passed the recovery door once and crossed himself when he saw me awake. By evening, the immediate crisis had shifted, as crises did in war. The heretic assault had not vanished. It had adapted. Rome had used the day to block one approach, flood 2 lower corridors, evacuate a hospital crypt, and move a battery that would otherwise have been taken from beneath. Men still died. The gate still breathed. The council still met, though not in the same chamber and not with recovered relics placed under silk. Brother Matthias read the official summary to me because I asked, and because he believed children should at least hear what their bodies had bought. Enemy subterranean ingress delayed approximately 22 to 29 hours across southern approaches. Contamination within council relic procedure identified and contained. False Casimir apparatus destroyed. Strategic recommendation. Suspend use of newly recovered relics pending total reauthentication. Implement cold iron inspection for all tactical reliquaries. Revise Might Demon screening protocol. Review candidate transmission rules under compromised array conditions. Review rules, I said. That part would take years. I had some spare ones once. He lowered the paper. Do not make jokes like old men. I needed practice. He looked angry, then sad, then tired. No. I closed my eyes. After a while I said, Brother Matthias? Yes. Was I useful? He did not answer at once. I feared many things in that pause. That he would say yes too quickly, because yes was what dying children were given. That he would say no, because the day had not been enough. That he would say usefulness was not the measure of a soul, which was true and useless, and exactly the kind of comfort adults offered when they had spent a child and wished to remain clean. He moved the chair closer. Wood scraped stone. You were Matteo, he said. Before useful, after useful, during useful. Rome would remember the day. I would remember the boy. That answer hurt more than yes. I kept it anyway. Night came without windows. The candles burned lower. Somewhere above, Rome endured the extra hours as soldiers endured any gift from God, by filling it with labor, fear, courage, mistakes, blood, and orders written in shaking hands. I lay in the narrow bed and felt my heart strike slowly, each beat heavy with years I could no longer spend. The Synod had taught me to count pulse costs, but no table had prepared me for the silence after the counting ended. Brother Matthias sat beside me until sleep took the room. I had given them 1 year per heartbeat, and the war had purchased only 1 more day.